another thing I was going to do, but I figure I'll do it here. Currently, for making maps like this one, I am using a free program called GIMP, G-I-M-P. And it's kind of like a free version of Photoshop. Photoshop is obviously better. It just is. I've worked with Photoshop a lot. I've worked with Illustrator a lot, which is an excellent program, by the way, if you're into making icons. But that's one of the programs I use. And then for a website, I use obsidianportal.com. Basically what they let you do is they let you make your own account, and then you can make your own campaign pages. And it allows you to make a wiki so that your players can quickly see what they've done over the course of an adventure or over the course of the history of the adventures. You can also show like what things are, like I've mentioned here the Moaning Strait, and I've discussed how it looks. And like the Moaning Strait on the map is over here. And people can quickly switch. Like, let's say they want to go, oh, okay, well, what's Heroes Heath? Then they can click it, and it brings them up to a blurb about Heroes Heath, which is right up here, this area. It's a very awesome tool. It's as good as the time that you put into it. If you put in a lot of time and you kind of learn the system, it can be an excellent resource and very good, and if the players are willing to use it. Those are the two major ones. The other thing I use is, I guess I'll pull it up. It's RP Tools, or RP Tool. Yeah, tools.net. And we use what's called map tools. If you go to downloads, it has all of them. And map tool is basically a virtual game board that allows you to host things online with people that have your password and LAN. There's token tool, which allows you to make tokens for this utility, and other things like that. Very cool. I've been very pleased with that. It works with any system, and you can do some awesome things on it. Oh, what other things to discuss? I think those are the main tools that you guys really should know about. If you don't know about the D&D Next playtest, that is on the Wizards main strat. I'll show you that real quick. I'll actually go to it, and then I'll try and link it in the chat where it's at. If you go to wizards.com, you can go to Brands, Dungeons and Dragons, and then that's Neverwinter. Where are we at? It says playtest up here. You go to playtest, and then you can go to start playtest now, and it'll have you sign up. So I'll go ahead and link that in the chat. So if you're interested in that, if you haven't played tabletop before, even though it's incomplete, because it's obviously a playtest, I think it's a very simple system. I think it's a very good system, actually, too. My experience comes from playing 2nd edition, 3rd edition, and Pathfinder, which is kind of a new take on 3rd edition in a way. I haven't gotten to play 4th edition. I really wanted to. It's just none of the people that I played with wanted to. They had these terrible misconceptions about it that were basically fostered by people who hated the edition. Edition wars are bad people. Everybody likes to play a different way. And if they can make it work, that's cool. What I really like about it is I feel like they give the power back to the DM like they had in 2nd edition. Also, I think that they simplified the system a lot more. If you're familiar with 3rd edition, there were just... rules were brutal. I actually got a book here. This is for Pathfinder, which significantly cut down on a lot of the rules and kind of streamlined them, by the way. So this isn't even an accurate representation of 3rd edition. So give me 1 sec, I'm going to go find that book. So yeah, this is the Pathfinder book. This is the core rule book. Now, this is slightly different from other rule books in that most, if you look at like D&D, they'll have like a player's handbook, a dungeon master guide, and a bestiary. And with this, they kind of smash together the DM guide and the player's handbook, so it's a little bit smaller. But essentially, you'd have rules in both of those things, so you kind of have to memorize all of them. Look at this fucking book. Look at this fucking book. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a great system and it's awesome. But you don't want to fucking teach this to people who've never taken tabletop. It will just take too long. You'll be explaining everything. I mean, I've been playing Pathfinder for like 2 years now, and I still don't know shit about the game. Like, there's just so much. And this is coming from 3.5 also, so I have somewhat of a background on this. I actually just picked this book up recently. I had before been using my digital PDF. But like I had to replace it, and I started reading this on the can, you know, when I get a chance, and I actually learn new things all the time. And I learn something new in like the 10 minutes it takes me to go to the bathroom, you know. But yeah, this is like 570 pages of rules. That's it's nasty. Obviously the rules will expand as the playtest gets further and further. Right now it's about 70 pages that you need to know. Maybe even less than that, depending on if you're a DM or a player. But it's considerably less rules. And they kind of streamline it, like, as an example of how they kind of streamline the process. For example, when you were in 3.5 or in Pathfinder, you had flanking, which is basically if you're on one side of a guy and then your friend's on the opposite side of him, like one of you on each side. It's obviously harder for you to fight one, or for this guy to defend against you guys, so you got like a +2 to your attacks on him. Well, although Next doesn't have rules specifically for flanking yet, this is what probably will happen. Instead of having these things like +2, or when you have this feat, your guy gets +1, or when they're in this range, you get +2, but you only get that to attack and not to damage, or there's a 20% chance to miss if you're in this fog. Like, all of these like tiny minute rules, they pretty much just crunched it all together and went, you know what? Except for cover, which is a different mechanic, you either have advantage or disadvantage. Very simple system. And the way those work is if you have advantage on something, instead of rolling once, you roll twice and you take the higher number. If you have it disadvantaged, then it's the same thing, but you take the lower number. So it's a way easier system, and there's way more applications that it can fit for. And it's just, it's so simple and so elegant, but I really like it. I think it's a great idea. Cover's like the only thing that it doesn't work on. Cover is actually, you do have to memorize some numbers. I think it's like -2 and -5 for half and 3/4 cover respectively. But that's pretty much it. Yeah. Dawn of War. Dawn of War was that's 40K, isn't it? Sorry, I'm not super into Games Workshop stuff. Like, I understand that a lot of people love Warhammer and stuff, but the rules, I've spent too much time watching people debate rules over it just like that. Rules are important. I think rules give structure to a game, but when the rules prevent you from flowing with the game is an issue. One of the other things that they did for Next is, if you're familiar with 2nd edition, I think they did this in 4th as well, but the idea of skill or ability checks are a big thing in this. You just roll an ability check. It's not so much skills anymore. There are skills in the game, but you can do every skill in the game without having it trained. It's just you won't get the bonus. If you do have the skill, then basically you'd roll your d20, you'd get your bonus from your modifier, and then you'd roll an additional d6, which is kind of what skill does. Skill checks also tend to be much lower, so does AC. When the numbers are lower, it's easier to balance, and I think that that'll work out a lot easier, or it'll help out when they're making content for it. Anything else to really mention about next? Every class that I've seen is very interesting. The only class that I didn't think was super interesting was Wizard, and I rolled one just because I want to see if it's actually, like, if it needs work or not. The reason why I say that Wizard seems kind of boring is even though they have a ton of spells, they only really have like one ability that they get, like special ability. You contrast that with like Clerics, which is the other full caster, and they actually get a lot of abilities as they progress, not just their spells. Druids are the same way. But every class that I've seen has been super interesting. I can't say that about other systems. Other classes just clearly looked worse or clearly looked better or just didn't look appealing. In this, it's kind of like everybody has something cool that they can do. I'll be really interested when they start to introduce new classes. They started to work on kind of like more of a core amount of classes. In an earlier playtest, they actually had Warlock and they had Sorcerer, but they removed them later on because they wanted to kind of deal with the core classes first. And then they'll probably introduce those later. But you can do some cool shit. Like if you played 3.5, you know how like brutal 2-weapon fighting was? How like you took these massive minuses? In this game, it's just you can 2-weapon fight with no penalty to your attack. Basically, only your main hand gets your plus to damage, though. Your offhand doesn't. But they both have to be light weapons, which is a special category of weapons. But because of this, for example, I made a wizard that's a elf. Big surprise. He does have actually an interesting quirk in his backstory. But I made a wizard who's an elf. And since we're also going low level, he can actually melee pretty good. Attack bonus, or what would be BAB before, is actually not as steep in scaling depending on what class you are. Like it used to be 1-to-1 if you're a fighter, and it was like 1-to-3, you know, for casters or whatever. In this, it's much less steep. So my wizard actually has 2 short swords. So the first time that we get into combat, he's gonna fucking whip out 2 swords and be like, "Didn't see that shit coming, did you?" and cut somebody apart. So, kind of waiting for that to happen. The one complaint that I've heard levied against the game in particular is that there's not enough variety. But, I mean, it's a fucking playtest. You know, what do you expect? They're not gonna have... It's not like 3rd edition, or it's not like Pathfinder where they've had years and years to develop this stuff. You know, so you gotta kind of take it for what it is, but you can still have some very awesome adventures, and I think the simplified system is really gonna strike home. If I was gonna just break it down, to me, it's 2nd edition meets 3rd edition. It might be 2nd edition meets 4th edition with some 3rd edition in there. So basically, they took everything. Like, they really tried to consolidate this into a nice package. And so far, I think they're doing an excellent job of it. I'm actually surprised I have so many people watching. And again, I guess I'm on at a reasonable hour right now. The previous casts that I had were done from like 12 to 4 a.m. This is Pacific Standard Time. So yeah, it's probably why I wasn't getting many people watching. But I'm glad to have you guys here, you know. It's cool to chat. If you have any more questions about this system, I guess I could show you the E6 purpose statement also, if you guys are interested in that. E6 Yeah. World's most popular. These are the general rule and game ideas for E6. I'm going to link them in the chat. If you're interested in that, though, it's a very interesting take and very cool. But yeah, this is how they describe it. Gritty fantasy, heroic fantasy, wuxia, which is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon stuff, and then superheroes. Very cool system, though. I'm glad that my friend showed it to me. If you wanted to run it with 3.5 in Pathfinder, it's obviously better. And that actually makes some very interesting things. If I can elaborate on that shortly. When you cut it off to level 6, basically your fighter classes don't get a second attack until level 6, so they kind of have to stay in a full BAB class. So it creates like a theming that way. However, if you do want to branch off into other classes, there are benefits. For example, if you jump from one class to another, you get the bonus saves for each one. So like if you just wanted to pump your saves really high, you could easily go like fighter for one level and then go paladin for another level. And then say you wanted sneak attack damage or evasion, you could go rogue for a level or two, you know. Now if you do that, like if you break for the rogue, then you obviously won't get your second attack, but you'll get a whole new bag of tricks to work with. So E6 is a really cool system. Very excited to try it out. To mention him again because, to be honest, you know, I kind of always wanted to stream, but this, it almost gave me a kick in the ass when I saw him do it. Spoony. I will go to his site, actually, so you can see that. By the way, my main page on Obsidian Portal, just to give you some ideas, like I have the welcome, I can post the general news there. And then this, for example, is the Genesis story of my world. And it's written kind of a poetic verse type of thing. So it's pretty cool. It also lets you load maps, which I have like the development map here. But I guess I'll give Spoony a shout out. This is the website. This guy, he does a lot of like game reviews and movie reviews, but if you go into his video list, which is right here, go down to the bottom, he has Counter Monkey, and that, it's a series where he talks about all different types of systems of tabletop gaming, what he liked, what he didn't, kind of funny stories that he's had, stuff like that. It's very good, very interesting, and a lot of the concepts that he talked about on there are things that I kind of picked up on or that I've thought before. And it's always nice to have your cause or have your opinion validated in some way. Keep in mind that I said my opinion, okay? Because you don't want somebody to validate your false facts, because that's just bad. But for somebody to validate your opinion and give you new insight on what your opinion might entail, it's a very good thing, I think. But he has some excellent stories and excellent concepts in there. I think I've mentioned it before, but I also do have some highlight videos. The one in particular that's kind of good to listen to is I have one where I talk about map naming conventions, like how you should name things on your map. The significance of how people name things in real life, creating adventuring opportunities. I'm going to have different things where I talk about some of the tenets of the DM, which is something that I actually have on this site as well. I guess I could talk about that just for a few moments. Probably going to be getting out of here in not too long, but, you know, try to help out as many people as we can, or get you guys interested, hopefully. If not in my channel, you know, maybe you'll get interested in tabletop gaming, you know. Start your own little thing. Let's see, I have Dungeon Master Guidelines, which was just a thing that I made for the DM so that they can get an idea. I'd like to cover some of the rules, and some of these rules we've adjusted. But it's basically the number one rule for both players and DMs that everybody should know, and yet everybody somehow seems to screw up at least once in their time, is we're here to have fun. If you're not having fun, you shouldn't be there. Second thing is the Dungeon Master is in total control of every aspect of the game. Another thing that I think players fail to do. They think that their character has to be a perfect little snowflake and they can't crit fail, or if they crit fail, you're not allowed to make them look funny or foolish, like, because they're a serious character in Grimdark. That doesn't mean that you should pick on somebody, but you gotta be willing to just laugh at it and take it in stride. Strive to be fair, honest, and consistent. Three things that are big for a DM in order to gain the trust of the players. Be punctual and prepared with your material for each session. Should be self-explanatory. Nobody wants to wait for you. Do not allow talk about politics, religion, and other controversial topics. This could differ for your group, but I found that this is integral, because the minute that any of these subjects come on, then either people quit having fun, fights start, or you basically just get sidetracked from your game, and it just slows it down to a crawl. Maintain a balance between allowing the awesome and maintaining realism. To cover that really quickly, I feel that you need to, if something isn't entirely realistic, but it's, you know, okay, it's something that you would see in a movie, let's say, let it slide. You know, as long as it's not just going to destroy something, that's good. That kind of goes into 9. When the two do not glaringly conflict, always allow what is awesome. Do not be afraid to backpedal to main the tenets of 3, 4, and 5. So let's say you say something and it's incorrect, or you just like forgot something. Just go back on it, you know? You can try to cover your tracks, that's fine. But if there's just no way around it, like Spoonie uses the analogy where he's like, well, how could the vampire hide this thing out in this tombstone without anybody seeing him? Like, he would have had to have been out here in the daytime. Well, shit. I guess the vampire's a daywalker now. Tips. Plan and try to design at least 3 different approaches to a situation. This helps try to make it seem like you're not railroading the characters, or that they feel like their skill choices are promoted. Like, don't just make it combat. Maybe there's a secret entrance in. Maybe they can talk their way in, you know, give those types of things. Give motivations to NPCs and monsters. It goes a long way to making them look believable and not just insane, megalomaniac, sociopathic, I'm going to destroy the world. You gonna rule the world? Nope, destroying it. Just seemed like the better thing to do. Be liberal with the advantage system when considering odd player actions. That has to do with this system particularly. Backgrounds is also in this. Skills, always keep skills in mind. Try not to pigeonhole people into fighting everything. Plan situations where social and general non-combat skills are useful. Same idea. Trying to find ways to make non-combat skills useful in combat. That can be kind of difficult, but you can work around it. Like, maybe you can create a situation where the players could, like, swing over a gap or something and leave their enemies behind. You know, just as a really quick and dirty way to describe it. Describe action as it happens if players do not provide visuals themselves. That just goes a long way to not make the game monotonous. How many times have you run a game and some guy was like, I rolled diplomacy. What does that even mean in real life? Like, fuck, tell me what you're doing. It's like, even something super simple. And like, if I attack. Okay. You hit. I did this damage. I did this damage minus this damage. It's, ugh. What's happening? Rob Vielbin. I hope everybody's enjoying their 4th or has things to do if you are in America for Independence Day. What other things? Make scenes theatrical when called for, even if it seems to freeze time. You know, things like this can really draw the players in and make them feel like this is a real place, or that they can visualize it better. Really draws them in, creates immersion. Create themes with dungeons when appropriate. This is such a huge thing. If I had to say one of the things that makes dungeons fail the most, I mean, you could say that they're less interesting, but this creates interest, and this is such an easy thing. To use a simple theme, what's in most RPGs? The elemental temples is an example. The elemental temples are the most basic idea of theming. When you go into the fire temple, what do you see? Just think in your head the first three things. What were the first three things? Were they like lava, fire, and stone? Something like that? Those are like the things that you see in the atmosphere. Work with that, you know, like that's simple theming. And that's the thing too. Rob just mentioned fire mage. Yeah, you could do things like fire mages and fire elementals, you know, creatures that are themed for fire. And you can really create interesting interactions. Like you might think, oh, it's just fire upon fire. Yeah, but imagine, say, that there's something that's immune to fire, and they're in, say, a volcano. This thing that's immune to fire and heat, they're running around on like kind of an outer ring, like a walkway. It's sweltering hot. You know, they've had to deal with like eruptions of lava shooting up. But what if they're walking by it and then all of a sudden something just jumps out of the lava? All of a sudden you've made a trap and a monster. You could say the trap is the monster jumping out and it kind of like dumps lava onto the walkway that they're on. So it either like melts the walkway away and they have to jump off, or maybe it lands on top of them. Like, these things write themselves. I mean, they really do. But that's a very simple thing with theming, and that happens for all of them, you know, water. And it doesn't even need to be like that. The one that Spoonie hates, but, like, you know, is something, the sewer level, you know. Create themes for a sewer. You know, you can add the shit monster. The turd golem. Let's see, what are some other good... You could even theme with creatures, too, is another thing. Like, you see that a lot as far as, you know, the Goblin Cave or whatever. But if you're going to do the Goblin Cave, don't just make it the Goblin Cave. Give the Goblin Cave some character. This is the Goblin Cave of the shaman that the tribes consult. And he has apprentices that, like, train under him. And basically they're, I don't know, what are they? Maybe they're gyromancers, which if you don't know what a gyromancer is, that's... There used to be a thing where, like, basically a cult would draw a circle on the ground, and then they put symbols or, like, letters down. And basically a person would spin in the middle until they, like, fell down, and then whatever they fell down on was part of the answer that they were searching for. Maybe they cast bones, you know? Who knows? Maybe these guys are actually really smart. That would be a twist on goblins. Like, they have a real connection with some sort of divine being that's not, you know, the god of goblins who's just down for killing and destruction. You know, give them some flavor. With the idea of casting bones, maybe inside of this goblin cave there's, like, collections of bones everywhere. And then here I talk about loot distribution. Another core of E6 I probably should have mentioned is that magical items are a lot rarer, because it's kind of like characters and normal PCs can't create anything that would be higher than level 6 or 8. So if they have to get like a sword that's like a +3, then they would have to travel somewhere special, like, and that creates more opportunities for adventuring. Maybe, you know, you guys need a sword that no mortal could possibly make in order to pierce the dragon's skin. But I have heard that the giants up in the mountain, they have special forges, and they actually harness lightning to craft their blades. Like, they might be able to make something for you to slay this dragon. All of a sudden, you've got a question and adventure. But that's kind of one of the cool things that I like about E6 also. Yeah, that's some of the tenets of the Dungeon Master. I also have ones for players that kind of outline some of the same things, but just in different ways. And Rob mentions, like, and maybe this wasn't what he was going for, but he's like the foolish elves of the small mountains. Another thing I talk about minorly, and I'm going to talk about in another section, is breaking away from Tolkien. There's nothing wrong with Tolkien. Don't get me wrong. He is probably the reason why, I don't want to say the reason why tabletops exist, but he's probably a major contributing factor to it. I think that they would have emerged eventually from something else, but Tolkien really made them mainstream. What I say when I mean breaking away from Tolkien is not everything needs to be... Elves don't need to be superior to everyone all the time. Dwarves don't need to be these gruff bastards every time. Orcs don't need to be murderous slobs all the time. Like, you think about how little fantasy has grown ever since Tolkien kind of took the mantle. It's pretty sad, actually. On Game Grumps, which is a channel on YouTube. Highly recommend them. Very funny. They do like kind of Let's Plays with a funny twist. JonTron mentions that... what's it called? I think it was JonTron, mentions that, like, there's such a rich assortment of different things in sci-fi that are so different, like vastly different. You can have like octopus men, you can have like beings made of pure energy, you can have like actual rock people, you can like you can just have so many different things. You can have like elephants with like razor sharp eyeballs, whatever. You can get away with anything in sci-fi, and people, as long as you write it in and do well with it, people will take it. And you can be so inventive with it. But all of a sudden in fantasy, you strike away from Tolkien, all of a sudden you suck. Or it's like, that's not the way they're portrayed. How did I kind of break away from Tolkien? I did it in my own little ways. Like, when I get it developed, elves aren't going to be the super intelligent people. They're going to be closer to Scandinavian myth and the original myths, where they're more like mischievous forest spirits. Yeah, John left a few days ago. I just wanted to give the mention. I still think it's funny. New guy's pretty good. But, if you don't like the show as it is now, then that's your prerogative, But, like, again, I was going to try to make elves more mischievous forest spirits. I wanted to do something with dwarves too, and I couldn't get away with it mechanically what I wanted. I originally wanted, again, like closer to an older myth style where it's like dwarves used to be unable to go in the sunlight, and that's why they were in mountains, because if they went out into the sunlight, they would turn to stone. And then they were vulnerable, they'd have to wait until the sun went down before they could go back in their caves. I kind of wanted something like that. I couldn't get away with that with the player characters because obviously that would limit them to a certain part of the day. But I actually made a group of dwarves like that in the Obsidian Crown, which is over here. Just like a special group of mountains also.